Hi, my name is Jerry Nixon, and this is Generative AI and Computer Science in Higher Education. I am a product manager on the SQL Server team at Microsoft. I am also a professor of computer science here in Denver at Colorado Christian University. And like you, I've been watching the advent of machine learning and starting to be curious and concerned on what that means in higher education in my institution, but also in my classroom. I care most about computer science, of course, so I like software developers a lot. And I want to talk about what I see as the both positive and negative implications coming. So let's start with what a student sees. When a student sees ChatGPT, they see it writing software. They see it as programming. They misunderstand what it can actually do. When you and I look at it, we realize that we are standing on a train track and that we can hear a train whistle in the distance. And we evaluate the track and we're like, this is going to be a big train. And we know that we need to be prepared when it comes. More importantly, we know that we have a responsibility for our students and to have them to be prepared for the reality that they will be graduating into. All right, that's cool. What do we do from there? Well, do we change education? Well, we already know what education is, right? It's not filling a pail, but it's lighting a fire. That's what we want to be as educators. That's the right reason we were drawn towards education in the first place. We want to create educated people. But what does it mean to be an educated person? I think looking through time, it'll be interesting to consider. If you go all the way back, it used to just be, could you read or write? But by early AD, it was around Socrates, right? And he cared about things like philosophy, mathematics, logic, and rhetoric. Great. It was easy to be educated back then, no doubt about it, because there wasn't much to be educated on. Go into the Dark Ages and things slow down a little bit, but by the time you get into the medieval ages, we introduce things like legal and medical knowledge. We have historical and political knowledge. And by the time we're into the Renaissance, we care about things like social reform, art, and culture. And as we move into Enlightenment, which of course is still part of the Renaissance, we see the elevation of scientific knowledge. That's incredible. There's a lot to learn. Each one of those is an individual school, each one growing at their own pace, each one difficult to keep up with. But there are decisions that are made by everybody all through time. Things they won't learn, things that they will only learn where it is when they need it. Things that they recognize other people learned and other people discovered, they will not be learning and they will not be discovering. They will learn to discover other things. And they will be growing and growing on top of the knowledge that already exists. The Industrial Revolution comes around, we see the fading away of generational tradecraft. That's the idea of that trade that your parents teach to you and what you teach to your children. It's replaced instead by vocational training. Now we're in the Industrial Revolution, of course, so now I can go into a factory, understand automation and process, and I'm able to assemble things. And if I need to change vocations, I'm trained on it. By the time we get into the modern age, now we have so much information that there's an expectation of mastery around information management and to be able to coalesce that into knowledge and have knowledge management all sprinkled on heavily with digital literacy. The amount of things that you need to know to be an educated person is astronomical. And we know that, right? We absolutely know that. Instead, we start changing the definition. And now we want to ask ourselves philosophically, is there a way that maybe ML can help us with this? I think there might be. One of the things we look at is how Isaac Newton said, if we are able to see farther than others, it's because we're standing on the shoulders of giants. It means that an educated person today maybe doesn't need to know some of the things that an educated person needed to in a previous age. Or maybe they do. It's just a discussion. We know, of course, education is not learning facts because there are too many facts. Instead, it's training the mind to be able to learn, especially for software engineers. We know that the three ingredients are the same for every learner out there, especially them. We know that we want them to have that learning mindset. We want to light that fire that makes them learn all throughout their life. We want to give them the critical thinking skills to be able to handle things they've never seen before, but still make sense of them, as well as the emotional and social maturity to be able to deal with constant change that they'll be graduating into. So we ask professional engineers today, what are you doing most of the time? 48% said the last thing they did was learn a new thing, right? That's important, a brand new skill. That's because this is a field that requires that. And you know your students, you know the type of student that is a software engineer. They are addicted to learning, and thank goodness, because they need to in order to meet the demands on them. And the problem really is demand. There is a supply-demand mismatch, and it is critical. It is existential in its problem. The talent shortage is unbelievable. Now, let me tell you just how much it is in case it seems small right now to you. This graph shows the percentage of companies that cannot hire the software engineers that they need. 75% this year, or last year, 2022. Look how it's ramping up. That's because demand continues to increase as companies realize the value of becoming more of a technical company, but they don't have the labor pool to pull from. It's up to you and me. What are we going to do? Create students out of the thin air? Maybe. Could we take students from other countries? Maybe we could just import talent. Well, not so fast. Turns out that the United States is just one of every other country out there. We all have the same problem. It is an intractable, it is, what is the right word? It is an intractable problem. Really difficult, even to pronounce. All right, so what are the real numbers? Well, in 2020, we had 53,722 graduates getting a CS degree. Now, I know it's not a perfect match of software engineers to CS degrees. This is a pretty good measure. Let's say it's off by 100%. That's pretty bad, actually, but let's just say it is. 100,000 brand new engineers that year. So we're getting close, right? Far from it. Bureau of Labor Statistics says the scarcity of engineers in the United States will reach 1.2 million by 2026. That's in 3 years. That is in 3 years. If we were producing 100,000 engineers a year, well, obviously, even at that rate, we're not hitting it. But let's say we did it again with another 100,000. It would still take us 12 years to get to the demand that's going to be here in 3. That's why I said it's kind of an existential crisis on us. How are we going to solve this? There's got to be a way. There are probably many ways, a list of ways. And one of them might just be what OpenAI has shown us. OpenAI shows up. We know, of course, they've been around for many years, but they kind of showed up on everybody's radar last year. And we did what we do best as academics, right? We decided whether to ban them or not to ban them. I understand, right? The New York public schools, they banned it. And why not? Because it is brand new. We don't know how to handle it. We don't know really what we're going to do just yet. But remember, this is a train that's coming in as unstoppable. We can see that right now, 2023, it's a $164 billion industry. Jump up to 2026. Remember, that's the year where 1.2 million engineers are not available for the demand. That now all of a sudden it's $433 billion in size. We cannot stop this from happening, and we have a responsibility to our students as well as society to be able to prepare them for the real world that they'll be graduating into, one where AI is sitting right next to them all the time and they need to be proficient with it. This isn't the first major watershed moment in education. We thought calculators would be a big deal. Let me just make a quick comment that calculators were a big deal, and we still teach our students long division. However, once they learn long division, the expectation is they will never do it again because we want them to do higher math. We have calculators to do the long division for them. Make sense? All right, so we had the idea, we had personal computers, we had CAD that we thought was going to destroy architecture. It did the opposite. We thought the internet was going to ruin us. Now it's a fundamental part of our classroom. And certainly COVID threw us for a loop. 2022, just last year. Now we have DALL-E and we have ChatGPT. DALL-E was the ability for me to type in text prompts and get back images, and it was astounding. ChatGPT is that large language model the reason we're here today is because that large language model allows me to interact with it just like a person, and it interacts with me just like a person until it doesn't. So maybe let me cast your mind back to when you were in college. Do you remember that roommate? It was a great roommate. That roommate would stay up with you through the wee hours of the night and debate your ideas. That roommate would help brainstorm your thesis and work with you through the problems in your class. That would also do one more thing. It would, even at the 11th hour, when you waited for the last minute to write your essay, they would proofread it for you and check your grammar. Is it possible that these ML models are going to be like a better roommate? One that's always available, one that is incredibly smarter and with perfect grammar? Maybe. So we asked professional developers, how much time do you spend just searching for answers? On a daily basis, about an hour. Look at the chart for yourself. Well, that is because they are searching the internet, and if anybody's good at searching the internet, they are, and they coalesce these ideas and they synthesize their own answers. But what if we had an ML model that could search the internet for you and could do all of that much faster? Could we create time in the hands of engineers? I think we could. Sam Altman, he's the CEO of OpenAI, he said, we know that ChatGPT has shortcomings around bias, and this is what he means. Bad data in, bad data out. But the problem is bias is nefarious. It is because of filtering, right? Where we falsely identify certain parts of data as unreliable. And so it is filtered out. Or maybe certain types of sources we choose based on categories of sources, or the language, not just the language, but even the tone of language can change the meaning of the article because it's written by humans. And don't forget, humans are also behind the scenes. They can decide certain sources are removed or added depending on their own preferences and biases. Then the model itself has inferences that are nothing but trouble. Bad data in, bad data out. And we care about digital inequity as educators as well, making sure that this is still affordable and available to students who may not have the same luxuries as the rest of us. And we also care about accessibility. You and I may not be using screen readers but we might be. And we want to make sure that all of these tools are available to everybody. It's good to remember what Abraham Lincoln said. Machine learning accuracy is very important to me. He was ahead of his time. So let's go back to Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI. ChatGPT is incredibly limited, but good enough at some things to create a misleading impression of greatness. It is a mistake to be relying on it for anything important right now. And yet we do, right? We feel like we want to. There's an accuracy just from imprecision. This is a model, not a calculator. It's trying to find the most probable answer and get as close as possible. So when I asked it what 355 times 455 was, it told me it was 161925, but when I pulled up a calculator, it's 161525. It was close. And if it was just English and not math, close is pretty cool. Math needs to be precise. Inaccuracy through imprecision. This one was in the news recently where the ChatGPT AI inside Bing was showing the pros and cons of different vacuum cleaners. And one thing it does that's special is it includes a link to the sites where it gets its information, which is pretty neat, right? Until you click on it and you realize those pros and cons aren't in that site. It gets an accuracy here from imagination. Literally, these models are able to hallucinate based on probable truths. And then it starts producing those. It's interesting and good to know. Another one is just around ignorance. So I asked it, what does the file keyword in C# do? And it said there is no file keyword, which is wrong. That's because it wasn't trained on information relevant to the file keyword. You're going to need to know. What was it trained on? What was it not trained on? Do you know? How could you know? So here are yet other things for us to think about. The problem is, though, our intuition says it's just so freaking smart. But I think you can explain that with the Dunning-Kruger effect. This is where we wrongly overestimate ourselves, just like we do with the AI. Right? Our relationship with the AI starts by saying, it's amazing and my life will never be the same, and immediately tanks. Where we realize that it's making things up. This is a scam and I don't want to be involved with it. And in our calmer moments, we turn back to it and we're like, wait a minute, I'm just using it wrong. Maybe there is a way for this to be in my toolbox, and we start trusting it again, but just a little bit. That's the roller coaster relationship that you've probably already experienced with ChatGPT. From a legal perspective, I think it's important to at least talk about what original content is. So let me give a prompt to ChatGPT. Write my brother an email telling him what I've been up to since Christmas. It does. The problem is ChatGPT doesn't know me, my brother, or what I've been up to since Christmas. So it writes something like this that says, one of the biggest things that happened since Christmas is that I started volunteering at the local animal shelter. But I didn't. It just used probability to kind of guess what would be right. However, what if I changed the prompt to be more thorough? What if I gave the prompt more context and information so that, right, my brother telling me how much fun we had at Christmas, how I appreciate the sweater that I received, and my daughter Annie looks forward to his visit in May, especially with dog Marley. Now all of a sudden the letter it generates is based on information that I've given it. And instead of finding probability and hallucinating an answer, it actually is expanding my prompt and writing things like, Annie's been looking forward to seeing you again in May when you visit. She can't wait to play with Marley, your adorable dog. I do not write to my brother like that, but nonetheless, the letter is that much better because it is expansion of the prompt. That's what I think is coming. I think there's a new language and it's imminent, some sort of prompt language, a kind of recipe for these AIs so that we can say, we want this type of casserole, here are the ingredients, and here's the cooking instructions, now do it. And it is more efficient at making a casserole. We are more efficient at creating a recipe. I think it's inevitable that we will be teaching our engineering students how to write prompts, how to write requirements, how to write acceptance criteria more clearly, more plainly, and more often. Here's an article, ChatGPT, and it's copyright chaos. This is a problem for the legal field that you and I don't have to deal with right now, but this is what's going on. If a person writes a brief instruction to ChatGPT, write a story about a girl riding a bike, it is unlikely that the resulting text would contain any enough human creativity to qualify for copyright law. However, if a human were to continually modify and direct GPT to fine-tune the story, it seems that the resulting text may be eligible for copyright protection. Why? Because the prompt is the content. The output of the AI is not. Weird, right? They have a tight relationship. Here's what you need to know about copyright right now. U.S. copyright law does not protect text, pictures, art created by machines, computers, animals, or any non-human creator. Got it? So if it was created by ChatGPT and you get it, there is no copyright claim. It's yours. Fascinating. Not so fast. Let's read the terms and conditions that OpenAI just updated. You are responsible for content. They used to just give you the content, but now they say you are responsible for content. That's the input and the output, including for ensuring that it does not violate any applicable laws, especially copyright. Now, why would they add that? The reason they add is because you can ask a question to this AI that is so broad that it can find 10,000 articles on the internet, coalesce those together into an answer that really is net new. It is new content for you. But you could also ask a question that is so specific that there is one article on the internet that talks about it, and all it can really do is produce a derivative of that article. Nothing that's net new. And a derivative of original content is a copyright violation. Fascinating. Now you need to know where it got all of its information. Do you know what ChatGPT was trained on or what it was not trained on? I don't. This is relevant, especially to software engineers who are getting code from ChatGPT. Which brings us to academic integrity. Let's talk about academic integrity because that's what really matters to you and to me. So let's use the context of how to open a SQL connection. That's pretty common, right? I want to write or read a database. So the first thing I would do naturally is to go to the online docs. I would find the example provided to me by the online doc, and I would use it in my code. Do I need to cite the online doc? Is it cheating if I use that example? Think about your answer. What about if instead of the online docs, I just find it like everybody else at Stack Overflow? It's the same code. I copy it. I put it in there. Do I need to cite that block of code in my method from Stack Overflow? Is that normal? If I don't, is it cheating? Am I violating academic integrity? What if instead I go to GitHub and I filter to only the repositories out there that do not have a license, that I can use their code freely, and I find that they have done what I want to do as well, open up a SQL connection, and I take their code? Do I need to cite GitHub then, even when there's no requirement for citation based on the license? What about when I open up Visual Studio and I have Copilot installed, and based on just the name of the method alone, it gives me the block of code to create a SQL connection? If I accept it, am I cheating? What about ChatGPT? ChatGPT, that ML model that I can talk to, and I can just say the exact same thing, and it gives me the same code that I would have found in the docs. Is it different in your mind? Is it different that all of a sudden, because it's from ChatGPT or some machine learning model, that there's a level of cheating that's different than seeing the code as an example on online docs? Does our definition of academic integrity meet reality? Should we reconsider what we're doing? Let's think about this. If you have Microsoft Word and you type a sentence, the machine learning grammatical service inside it will give you a more clear sentence. If you select their suggested sentence, do you need to cite Microsoft Word? It's still an ML model. These are things we need to just consider. The other thing we'll consider now is just like what changes in the classroom. There are many things that change in the classroom, especially when it comes to computer science. And the first would be around assignments. We know that we need to stop with rote assignments, right? We know that early in your college career, your first year, first few months, you're going to need to learn syntax and prove you know it fine. Yes, I understand. I'm just talking about as we move forward. Many rote assignments are because you and I as educators just don't have time. Now we need to think about teaching things that are around design and the ability to review code and the availability to debug code. Because as the AI gives us new code, we need to be able to process it. We need to be able to deal with it. It's a big deal. So these are the skills that are the future skills. What about assessments and how we test? Well, we need to test systems instead of syntax. We need to start testing patterns because that's what is going to matter. That's where the human intuition is going to pay off. We need to maybe even revive oral exams, right? Maybe they need physical presence right in front of us because after all, we are an accredited organization. We are giving you a degree. We need to make sure that you really are learning. I think we could see that happen. I think we could really see that happen. We may even need closed workstations where we can make sure that there's no AI being used during the assessment. What about experiences? Well, the experiences will change because they'll be more accessible and involved, more personal, and more consistent. Let me explain. Let's pretend I go to ChatGPT and I say, write an exercise on how to filter an array, and it does. Now, I could write my own. That's fine. But let's pretend I write my own, and I give it to ChatGPT, and then I say, take that same exercise, but make it interesting to art students. Take that same exercise, make it interesting to girls. Take it and make it interesting to NASCAR fans. Make it interesting now to ROTC students. And you can see it's still the same assignment. It's just changed a couple of things to make it more applicable because we know that the adoption of these engineering practices to students who are just curious and interested, and they come to your class and they want to be engaged, but they don't feel there's any personal connection. Now I can do that. And I could even say, make it interesting to our basketball players. And perhaps most importantly, since this is an engineering audience, make it interesting to Star Trek fans, right? Because we want to make it so it's accessible. We want to make it so it's involved, more involved. We want to make it so it's more personal. but also consistent. So let's keep going and I'll show you something. So I might ask ChatGPT, let's make a rubric around this assignment. And it gives me one. Now I could make my own, but let's just go for it for now. Maybe I paste in my rubric. That's fine. And I can say, based on that rubric, take this assignment from this student and grade it. Now it gives me a grade. How beautiful is that? Because it is, again, like my roommate who's right there is like, hey, did you even see number 5? I know she didn't grade number 5 yet. And I can say, well, okay, I'm going to give it this grade, but I can at least have somebody pushing back on me to make it even better. You only have so many hours in the day. How many students do you have? How many classes do you have? Is this an incredible benefit, perhaps, to faculty as much as it is to students? And then look what you can do. I can say, let's write a letter to that student whose name is Jerry and explain that grade. I can add more information about the student as well. So when the letter is written, it is a personal letter. And the personal letter makes reference to the actual assignment that they turned in that was unique. That is really, really cool, right? I would be irresponsible to take this letter and send it to a student without first editing it. However, what an incredible starting point. That's because it's all about making it more accessible, making the student more involved, making the assignments more personable, and also making the grading more consistent. But there are things that do not change. For example, the learning mindset never goes away. It will be a lifetime of learning, and that's what we want it to be. Who knows where we go next? We're predicting the future. We could easily be wrong. We'll never get away from critical thinking. We know that they're going to come up against things that they've never seen before. We need them to be able to understand them and just rationalize their way around them. That's important. And we want to give them the maturity to be able to handle a complex real world that's coming at them when they graduate. So let's predict the future together. Right now, what does all this AI business mean? Well, right now, it means that engineers will continue to code and they will start dabbling in AI. There's no getting around it. What do we do in the short term, though? The short term is just around the corner. The short term is where engineers continue to write code and they start to rely on AI. This is where you and I as educators need to prepare our students for the real world they're going to graduate into. There's kind of a midterm coming. What's coming right after that? Well, this is where the AI is relied on even more to write even more code, but the human engineer is now validating that code to make sure it's secure, to make sure it's performant, to make sure it's scalable, to make sure all of the things that are necessary. And then there is a long term. And what is that? The long term is where the AI is doing all the coding and all of the reviewing. But the engineer is responsible for that language, that prompt language, writing the request, writing the acceptance criteria, right? Being able to take all of the characteristics of what the software needs to be and communicate that from the business in a technical sense directly to the AI. Right? That is the long-term future. It's inevitable. We can all see that it's there. It could be a long way away. It could be a short time away. I'm not going to bet either way, but it is inevitable. And for us to say it'll never happen, that's ridiculous. Okay, let me leave you with these questions for you just to ponder. First, what is your own attitude towards technology, especially around things like ML and ChatGPT? When you see content that was originated there, do you look at it differently? Do you think about it differently? Do you all of a sudden just write it off? I mean that honestly. You need to ask yourself. I ask myself all the time. Okay, are your assignments, are they mostly rote or design because we know they need to be around design? Rote is important, but that's a short-term issue. Design is the long-term value. Do your assessments test knowledge or understanding? This is an age-old question, of course. We definitely want to be testing understanding because knowledge is something that can be supplemented by an AI. Are you preparing your students for the real world they'll be graduating into? One where AI is ubiquitously everywhere. This is an imminent issue. And you and I, we have responsibility for our students to be prepared for it. What do we need to do? What are the pivots in our classroom? Some of the things I've mentioned, but maybe others. Can your students communicate requirements? Do they understand what acceptance criteria are? Turns out communication still is one of the most valuable things that any engineer can have. Maybe more important than ever. Communicating to a computer? Yeah, absolutely. Who better to do it than a software engineer? And then finally, is your definition of academic integrity realistic? Do we need to change what it means, right? Because it comes from a machine learning model, am I cheating, right? What does it mean to have original content? What does it mean for me to need citation? Just things we need to revisit. And I'll leave you this most important thing. So, I'm a Star Trek fan, and I really am. And so Star Trek, The Undiscovered Country, that's Star Trek 7, my favorite movie. The Federation is trying to make peace with the Klingons, and the Klingons say one of the most profound things I have ever heard. If there is to be a brave new world, our generation is going to have the hardest time living in it. You and I as educators, this came on us fast. We are going to need to pivot, and we are going to need to deal. but we want to because we have embraced education. We are educators. We love our students, and we want to prepare them for the real world. There are things we need to consider, important things, and we can do it together, sharing with one another. This is a fantastic conversation that certainly doesn't end here, but this presentation ends here. Thanks for listening.